What's going on, guys? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the T-Mobile Revvl V Plus 5G. This phone is the newest T-Mobile Revvl phone out right now, and in this video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about the phone to help you decide if it's the right one for you. But before we get started, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So this phone has a 6.82-inch IPS LCD display, real good size, especially if you're doing something like content consumption, watching videos, viewing photos, playing games, even reading. All that kind of stuff is going to be great on a large display because, of course, everything is going to show up larger, so it's going to be easier to see, especially with reading. Regardless of the quality, reading is always good on a large display. So if that's going to be one of your primary uses of your phone, keep that in mind. The display has a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So not bad at all. Pretty typical for a 5G phone in this price range, or pretty much any phone in this price range for that matter. You usually don't see 1080p displays. Sometimes you will see 1080p in this price range, but it's not too common. The OnePlus Nord N200 5G actually does have a 1080p display, and the price isn't too far off from this phone. So if you are looking for a better quality display, that might be something to keep in mind. But overall, I would say the display does look really good. The bezels aren't too thick, and although the phone is a little bit chunky, it's not too uncomfortable to hold in your hand. Now up here, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 16 megapixels. I'm not a huge fan of the water drop notch, and this water drop notch is a little bit thicker than some of them, so that, in my opinion, makes it even worse. But the rest of the phone does look okay. This phone is getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that's pretty average for this price range. I wouldn't say it's above and beyond because I have seen 128 in some similar phones, but at the same time, 64 is not bad by any means, and for the average user, that's pretty much all you're gonna need. And even for power users, 64 gigabytes is a lot of space for apps, and you can always use a microSD card for your photos and videos. So overall, unless you have just a ton of things or just don't like microSD cards, you're gonna be fine on storage. This phone has no wireless charging, which is not a surprise, although it is a little disappointing, even though I do expect it. But one day we're gonna get phones that aren't flagship phones that have wireless charging. And I know there are some out there, but they're just so uncommon right now. And wireless charging is such a simple feature that I would have expected it to be implemented in at least mid-range phones by now. Wireless charging might not sound very useful at first, but trust me, I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and let me tell you, I used wireless charging on my phone so much. It's one of those things where you never think you'll need it until you actually do end up needing it. And if you don't have it at that point, it ends up being a huge bummer. But anyway, even though this phone doesn't have wireless charging, it does have a nice fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Super easy to reach. Even when your display is off, you're most likely going to be touching that button to wake up the display, whether it's out of necessity or just by habit. So having it unlock at the same time is always a good thing. In addition to that, it does have face unlock too, but let's give the fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. So as you can see, I did it the first time when the display was completely asleep, and the second time I did it from the always on display itself. And both times it was equally fast and responsive, so I have no complaints about this fingerprint scanner. We got a triple camera setup on the back with a 16 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. I really wasn't expecting much when I was testing this camera out, but surprisingly, this phone does take really good pictures. Let me show you. So this is a photo that was taken with the rear camera of the phone, and to my surprise, it looks really high quality and really nice overall. The lighting was handled really well, showing that the phone has a good sensor, the colors look really nice, it's decently sharp, so pretty much no complaints. This is a photo taken with portrait mode, and I was honestly even more impressed by this photo. A lot of the time in these mid-range phones, the portrait mode is a little choppy and things are blurred that shouldn't be, but with this phone it looks super professional. I would definitely say if you're taking photos to keep, whether for social media or something else, this phone will get the job done. This is a picture taken with the ultra-wide camera. I'm gonna be honest, it's not nearly as impressive as the normal camera or the portrait mode, but it's still pretty good for what it is. I can at least appreciate that this phone has an ultra-wide camera to begin with. I did recently do a bunch of videos on the OnePlus Nord N200 5G that's a little bit higher quality and more expensive than this phone overall. And that phone didn't have an ultra-wide camera, and this phone does. And there are plenty of other phones out there that are much higher level than this phone that don't have ultra-wide cameras. And it's such a useful feature that I'm glad to see that this phone does have one. Now, as far as video goes, this phone has a max shooting quality of 2K in the rear camera and the front camera as well. I was a little surprised to see that it can shoot 2K in the front camera too, because usually, even with high-end phones, the front camera tends to have a lower max quality than the rear camera. And I didn't believe it at first, I really had to double check this one. But as we can see right here in video mode, it does say 2K. So there we have it. It does shoot 2K in both the rear and the front cameras, which could be a good thing if you like that quality. But for me personally, I just feel like 2K isn't that useful. In my opinion, if you want to shoot a high quality video, you could just spend a tiny bit more on the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G and shoot 4K. Otherwise with 2K, it doesn't really seem to make that much of a visual difference, but it makes the files unnecessarily large. So all in all, in my eyes, there's really no benefit. But if you do like shooting 2K videos, then by all means go for it. Internally, this phone is getting 4 GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on the phone and it came back with a single core score of 541 and a multi-core score of 1692. So for a phone in this price range, this is actually really impressive. It's a bit more powerful than some phones out there that are a little bit more expensive than this phone, but overall, this phone's gonna be able to do pretty much anything you want it to. Whether you're just browsing the web and going on social media, streaming videos, mobile gaming, you name it. The only time I could see it struggling a little bit is with something like Fortnite that requires an insane amount of CPU. Then I could see it struggling, but honestly, you should be able to do pretty much anything. Now, I wouldn't expect flagship phone performance because this phone is by far not at that level. But if you do want to do your average basic daily tasks and more, in most cases, this phone will get the job done fine. For battery, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 18 watt fast charging, so that's really good. This phone does have a huge battery that's gonna last to the end of the day, even with heavy use, and even if it does run out of battery in the middle of the day, you can charge it up a lot faster since it does support 18 watt fast charging. Another thing I like about this phone is that it has NFC. In case you don't know, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services. So like Google Pay, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, all that. And a lot of phones in this price range, I actually want to say most of them, don't have NFC, which is a big disappointment, but this phone does, so you won't miss out on that feature. And I think that's a really good thing since NFC is becoming more and more widely used and accepted as time goes on. But now that we've gone over some of the features of the phone, let's take a closer look at the hardware. On the left side, right here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the micro SD card. Volume keys right here. The power key that also doubles as the fingerprint scanner. The power key is also pink, consistent with the T-Mobile colors, which I think is really cool. On the top of the phone, nothing going on up here except the noise canceling microphone. On the bottom, we got the 3.5mm headphone jack, the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. The back is made of a matte material with the T-Mobile logo right here in the middle. And again, it has the colors that I think are really cool. When you look at this phone, there's no mistaking this is a T-Mobile phone. We got the camera and the flash, of course. And overall, I do like the design of the phone, except the water drop notch. I'm just not a big fan. And the only other thing, it's really not that big a deal, but the phone is just a little thick, a little chunky. But since it has such a large display, it's sorta okay that the phone itself is a little bulky. I will forgive that just because the display is so big. and it's gonna give you such a good experience when you're streaming video, playing games, and doing all that. But in conclusion, my final thoughts about the T-Mobile Revvl V Plus 5G. Despite only having a 720p display and having a weird max quality for shooting videos and maybe being a little bit chunky and having a water drop notch for the front facing camera, this phone is actually a really good deal, especially for the price range. You're not only getting a 5G phone, but you're getting a 5G phone that has a great processor that's really powerful and is going to be able to handle pretty much anything you throw at it. It has NFC, a great amount of storage, a huge battery, and a large screen for content consumption. So if you are looking for a phone with great specs at a great price, then the T-Mobile Revvl V Plus 5G is going to be a great option. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video.